were never meant to hear this. Not from me, not from anyone. The records were burned. The headmaster died with the key still in his hand. And the only living witness hasn't spoken a single word since 1974. Yet here you are, sitting in the dark with me, waiting for the kind of truth that stains every man who carries it. If you stay, you cross the line between the story you were told and the one buried beneath the ash. Understand this, Grayhaven School was never just a school. That was the mask, the costume, the lure meant for proud families who thought they were sending their children to a sanctuary for gifted prodigies. But every mask hides a face, and beneath Grayhaven's, what stared back was not education, but extraction. The school was built in 1893 on the edge of Millfield, Vermont, remote, silent, and walled in by pine and stone. Not one brick was laid by accident. Its architects designed it with a precision that betrayed something older, something ritualistic. Halls mirrored each other but were never exact, one step off, one stair missing. Every angle was just slightly wrong, the kind of wrong that disorients the human mind without it knowing why. The east dorm reflected the morning sun perfectly, except for one window. One dark window that looked straight into the sealed shaft beneath the chapel. The men who signed the charter called Grayhaven a haven for exceptional children of exceptional families. That was a lie. What it really was a theater, a stage, a place where children became instruments, where dreams became data, where whispers in the walls carried more weight than the lessons written on chalkboards. Between 1959 and 1971, 5 children disappeared. Daniel, Isabel, Jonah, Maeve, and Ellis. 5 names you won't find on any missing persons list because the school erased them. Their records, gone. Their dormitories reassigned. Their families received letters, handwritten in a careful, familiar hand, stamped with the school crest, assuring them their children had withdrawn voluntarily. But mothers knew better. One, Eleanor Price, swore she received a phone call weeks later. The voice on the line sounded like her son, except slower, dulled, as if something had slipped inside the shape of his body and hadn't learned how to use it yet. The head archivist of the school, Malcolm Fennick, kept a ledger in red leather. It should never have left the vault beneath the restricted library. But in 1982, a groundskeeper found it hidden under the north wing floorboards. He thought it was nothing, just another dusty book. 2 days later, scaffolding collapsed on him during chapel renovations. Crushed. Dead. Inside that ledger were 117 pages of meticulous observation, not of lessons, not of grades, but of responses. Psychological trials, isolation rituals, and always beneath the names of the 5 vanished children, the same Latin phrase scratched in red ink, vocati non redierunt. The called did not return. That phrase, it was not unique to Grayhaven. It was older, found in fragments across Europe, etched on forgotten altar stones, whispered in records of black orders that worked in silence, generations before America was even born. Grayhaven was not a beginning, it was a continuation. You need to understand, these 5 children were not random. They shared traits, heightened sensitivity, dreams they could recall in vivid detail, an uncanny awareness of things no child should sense, shadows before they formed, sounds without a source, the taste of storms before clouds gathered, the kind of children society calls gifted, the kind of children secret institutions call useful. Each one was transferred into room 17B before vanishing. And what lay behind 17B's wall was the old observatory shaft, bricked over, sealed, silenced. Students whispered about voices in that room, not footsteps, not echoes, full conversations, clear as someone leaning to whisper in your ear, though no one stood there. Jonah, one of the vanished, wrote to his brother days before he disappeared. In the letter he described the ones in the floor. He said they sang at night. Not in English, not in any language he knew, but in symbols that burned behind his eyelids when he tried to sleep. He tried to draw them, crude at first, then sharper, more precise. They matched nothing in folklore, no religion, no science. They were something else, something alive. The chapel above that shaft was rebuilt in 1949 after what the official report called a fire, but the fire brigade found no flames, no smoke, just a spiral burned into the stone, perfect and centered beneath the pulpit. That spiral wasn't there before, and when Headmaster Cranley ordered the pulpit sealed, bolted shut, he wasn't covering damage, he was covering an opening. That's why no student is allowed to touch the pulpit to this day, but some do. And when they do, something in their eyes changes. They stop speaking as often, they carry silence like it belongs to them, and those who knew them before say it's as if something else is looking through their faces. This is where the illusion fractures. Grayhaven was never built to teach, it was built to contain, to house, to feed. And the 5 who vanished? They didn't vanish at all. They were consumed. Grayhaven was never random. Every stone, every corridor, every locked door was intentional. The kind of intention you don't see in schools or hospitals or churches. The kind of intention you see in shrines, in prisons, in machines. The original blueprints, uncovered by accident in 1932, revealed something the school never admitted. Beneath the classrooms and dormitories was a second structure, a sub-level without mapped exits. A concentric maze carved in reinforced stone, copper lines etched into its foundation like veins carrying a current, all leading to a single sealed chamber at the center. It bore only one word on the plans: observatory. But there was no telescope, no windows, just a locked door. What was being observed was not the stars. The builder, Elias Wren, left no children, no journals, no record of his life. He vanished after Grayhaven was finished, his name only appearing again decades later in letters linked to obscure European brotherhoods. But the marks of his design are undeniable. He created a structure that didn't teach, it tuned. The walls of Grayhaven were not neutral. They were instruments. Students often complained about headaches, buzzing in their ears, faint whispers that came from nowhere. They were told it was stress, imagination, the overactive minds of gifted children. But staff reports discovered in Fenwick's ledger tell a different story. They describe tones, frequencies assigned to each classroom, resonant hums played beneath every lecture. Too low to consciously detect, but always there, constant. This wasn't education, it was conditioning. Every Friday the children gathered in the chapel to sing a hymn no one could trace. Sanctum vocum, no composer, no surviving sheet music. It was passed down by memory alone, generation to generation. But when forensic archivists slowed recordings of it in 1970, they uncovered something chilling. Another voice beneath the singing. Guttural, low, chanting in counterpoint, speaking names not found on any roster, and the hymn had power. Teachers noticed changes in students after weeks of repetition. Bright children went silt. Playful ones grew solemn. Some stopped speaking altogether. Others began muttering in their sleep, in tongues no one recognized. A teacher named Miss Callahan kept a notebook. She wrote down the phrases she heard whispered in the dorms at night. The bell is under the bed. He wears no face at dawn. 5 seats, only 4 returned. Her final entry was scratched into the back cover with a sharpened paperclip. 6 words. I hear it in the hymn. She vanished in 1969. Now, the spiral. The fire that supposedly gutted the chapel in 1949 left no burn marks, only a spiral carved into stone, perfect and unbroken, centered beneath the pulpit. It was not decorative, it was instructional. Students placed near it during service often reported vivid dreams, auditory hallucinations, and compulsions to draw strange shapes. Some woke with bruises in patterns, circles, spirals, even sigils, that only became visible when viewed under candlelight. This spiral wasn't new. The same design had been found on a 14th century altar slab unearthed in eastern Prussia. Its inscription was a warning: do not wake what cannot be named. But Grayhaven ignored the warning. They built over it, and the children were the offerings. Program 5A was the name whispered in hidden memos. Parents never heard of it. Most teachers didn't either. It was for spiritual aptitude, according to declassified diocesan notes. But those who entered Program 5A were never the same again. They became instruments, tuning forks, vessels. Jonah described it before he disappeared. He wrote of the ones in the floor, the voices that sang symbols instead of words. He drew them obsessively. His final sketches matched the glyphs carved beneath the altar stone. The tones weren't just notes, they were phonetic transcriptions of those glyphs, sounds designed not for beauty, but for resonance. When students hummed them in unison, the air itself seemed to shift. Windows rattled, birds abandoned the bell tower. One janitor swore the chapel bell rang on its own, and every time the children changed. That's what the ledger revealed. Grayhaven was never haunted, it was hungry. The architecture was a mouth, the tones were the teeth, and the children, bright, sensitive, open children, were the sacrifice. Every time the hymn rose, something beneath the stone stirred. And this is the question no one dared ask. What was being fed? 5 names. That's all the ledger gave us. But names hold power, especially when written in blood ink and hidden beneath floorboards. Daniel, Isabel, Jonah, Maeve, Ellis. On paper they were ordinary children, 10, 12, 13 years old. Sons and daughters of respected families who thought Grayhaven would nurture their brilliance. But the school did not choose them at random. Each one was marked long before they ever walked the stone halls. Daniel Ree, age 12, described as sensitive, quiet, prone to vivid dreams. His mother told neighbors he would wake in the night screaming of faces under the floor. Weeks before he disappeared, he tried to pry open a locked grate in the sublevel, claiming he could hear her voice beneath it, pleading, crying. For this, he was punished, isolated. And 3 weeks later, he was gone. The record said voluntary withdrawal. The truth was written in his journal, a single line scrawled over and over. The altar is not stone, it remembers. Isabel Crane, 11. Bright, precocious, an artist. Teachers praised her drawings until she began sketching figures she had never seen, robed shapes with elongated fingers, faces stretched backward as if listening to something above human pitch. She told classmates they came to her at the mirror hour, exactly 3:33 a.m., when she was awoken by footsteps that stopped at the foot of her bed. She didn't ask if the figure was there. She was asked to describe it. Not once, not twice, but night after night. And her drawings grew sharper, more precise. One sketch, still preserved in the archives of a private collector, matches carvings found in ancient catacombs beneath Lyon, France. Catacombs Isabel could never have known existed. She vanished the following spring. Jonah Clay, 13, the one who heard the ones in the floor. He began humming strange tones during class, sounds that unsettled even the instructors. He said the tones came to him in sleep, written in symbols that drew themselves on his eyelids. When slowed and analyzed decades later, his hums matched frequencies used in classified military sound experiments, tones known to induce panic, disorientation, even unconsciousness. But Jonah was only a child. His last letter to his brother described a presence at night, not a monster, not a ghost, but something listening through him. Maeve Edings, 11, subject M in observation log 7C. She was awakened at 3:33 every night as part of something called the mirror hour. Her task was always the same: describe the figure standing at her bed. Never if, always what. The records show she saw the same thing every night: a robed figure with fingers too long, head tilted back, listening to frequencies no human ear could hear. At first her drawings were crude, but within weeks they became precise renderings of something that defies all religious iconography, something that doesn't belong to any fate. 8 we know. She was last seen on October 12, 1966. Her bed was empty, her shoes were gone, her pillow still warm. Ellis Thorne, 14, the one who survived long enough to write a journal. He broke curfew once with Jonah to follow the sound of a metronome, tick, 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 from beneath the chapel floor. Crawling through a vent shaft, they saw what no child should see. 5 chairs arranged in a circle, occupied by children blindfolded, twitching, humming discordant tones, while a tall figure stood silent in the center. Ellis dragged Jonah away, but from that night forward, both boys were never the same. Blackouts, memory lapses. Ellis once woke barefoot 4 miles from the school with mud in his mouth. Jonah began dreaming in numbers, 5-digit sequences, always the same 5. They told no one. A year later, both were gone. When Ellis's journal was recovered decades later, rotted but intact, his final words were clear. "It's not that the school took us, it's that we were never meant to leave." Grayhaven wasn't haunted. It was hungry. Now listen carefully, because this is where the veil tears. The 5 vanished children were not forgotten. Their names appeared again, hidden in a folded parchment sealed in wax inside the pulpit of the chapel after the school's closure in 1982. 5 names, no ages, no dates, just Maeve, Jonah, Ellis, Ruth, Caleb. Ruth and Caleb were never reported missing. No record of them exists in official enrollment. Yet the parchment listed them among the 5. That means Grayhaven erased not 5, but 7. 2 more than the world ever knew. The parchment bore a symbol, 3 crescents encircling an eye. That same symbol is carved beneath the altar in the sealed observatory chamber. The symbol doesn't belong to Grayhaven. It belongs to something older, something imported. The Brotherhood of Sable Mercy. They sold the land to Grayhaven's founders in 1887, with one condition: the foundation must follow the original lines that mirrored a 14th century altar slab from Prussia, the same slab inscribed with the warning, "Do not wake what cannot be named." But Grayhaven didn't just wake it, it fed it. And those 5 souls, they didn't vanish, they became part of the machine. The true architects of Grayhaven never stood in its classrooms. They never raised chalk to slate or called attendance. They were shadows behind shadows, scribes whose names were written only in iron gall ink, in documents never meant for public record. They called themselves the Brotherhood of Sable Mercy. In 1887, 6 years before Grayhaven's cornerstone was laid, a land transfer was filed in Millfield's archives. You won't find it digitized, you won't find it indexed, but the box remains in the town's historical society, its papers brittle, the ink still faintly metallic. The seller was listed simply as the Brotherhood of Sable Mercy. No address, no seal, just a condition written in precise 4-8 line script. The foundation must follow the original lines. Payment was not recorded in dollars, not in gold, not in land rights. It was measured in blood weight, 11 pounds 6 ounces. That figure was signed off by 3 witnesses, 2 of whom were committed to state asylums within a year. The land itself was cursed long before Grayhaven rose. Farmers swore their cattle refused to graze. Tools left overnight rusted by morning. One laborer lost his sight for 3 days after striking an underground chamber while digging fence posts, a chamber quickly sealed in stone. Why would anyone build a school there? Because the Brotherhood wanted it built there, and Grayhaven was never meant to be a school, it was meant to be an instrument. The Brotherhood of Sable Mercy appears in fragments across European history. Inquisition records from 1622 mention a cloaked fraternity in Lyon accused of conducting rites of exchange with children. In 1741, an abbey in eastern Prussia was condemned when a spiral identical to Grayhaven's was found burned into its altar stone. Survivors spoke of chants that were not human. That abbey was razed. Its altar slab vanished. Decades later, the same symbol resurfaced in Vermont. 3 crescents encircling an eye, always the eye, watching, measuring, waiting. The Brotherhood was not interested in wealth. They were interested in resonance, in tuning. Their writings suggest a belief that children, especially sensitive, gifted children, could serve as conduits between this world and something older, something beneath. They called it the Hollow, not hell, not heaven. The Hollow, a space that breathes through stone waiting to be filled. And the ritual was always the same. 5 children, always 5, never 4, never 6, 5 chairs in a circle, 5 tones drawn from glyphs carved centuries earlier. The tones weren't sung for beauty, they were sung to open. That's why the Brotherhood demanded Grayhaven's foundation align with the ancient lines. Those lines mirrored the Prussian altar slab, the one inscribed with the warning, "Do not wake what cannot be named." But warnings mean nothing to men who crave control. The Brotherhood knew the power of control was not in swords or crowns, it was in minds. And children's minds are clay, soft, unformed, resonant. They could be bent, tuned, broken, reassembled into vessels. Grayhaven was not built to educate, it was built to select. Think of the architecture again. concentric circles beneath the chapel, copper veins etched through stone, classrooms resonating with low hums, hymns layered with hidden voices. This was not a mistake. It was a D.E. sign. The school itself was the ritual. The children were the offerings. The Brotherhood's motto, uncovered in scraps of their Latin correspondences, was simple. Vocati non redierunt. The called did not return. It wasn't a warning. It was a proclamation. Those chosen would never leave because their purpose was never to leave. And the 5 who vanished from Grayhaven? They weren't failures. They were the successful trials. But why? Why feed children to stone? Because the Brotherhood believed the hollow beneath the school was not empty. It was alive. It listened, and when the tones were sung, when the spiral burned, when the hymn rose in layered voices, it fed. And feeding was only step 1. Control is never about the act itself. It is about what comes after. The Brotherhood's writings suggest they sought not to worship the hollow, but to harness it. To use the tuned children as vessels, anchors through which the hollow could whisper, command, manipulate. Imagine shaping not just a school, not just a generation, but entire nations by controlling the resonance of minds before they ever became men. That was the vision of Sable Mercy. Mercy for who? Not for the children. Mercy for the world above, that they believed must never be left unshepherded by those who had the courage to look into the dark. You're beginning to see it now, aren't you? Grayhaven was never haunted. It was engineered. The Brotherhood didn't build a school. They built a mouthpiece, and the 5 souls that never left? They were the opening chords of a symphony you were never meant to hear. If Grayhaven was a body, the chapel was its heart. It wasn't grand, not in the way cathedrals are grand. It was modest. Wood beams, simple pews, a narrow aisle leading to a raised pulpit. To the casual eye it was plain, even unremarkable. But those who sat in its benches spoke of a heaviness, not the weight of worship, but the weight of something listening. At the front, beneath the pulpit, lay a flaw in the wood grain. Some thought it natural. Others swore it was deliberate, 3 crescents encircling an eye. The Brotherhood's mark, carved so faintly that only certain light revealed it. The spiral began there. The chapel's floorboards concealed a mechanism older than the school itself. Beneath the planks, engineers had embedded copper vases, wires drawn taut across stone in concentric circles. If struck, the whole system resonated, like a harp hidden underground, and the pulpit sat at the spiral's center. Whoever spoke there did not merely preach. Their voice entered the stone. Their tone sank into the earth. Witness accounts, mostly from groundskeepers and repairmen, describe a sound that never left the chapel, a faint hum, too low to pinpoint, always present. If you hummed along, your chest vibrated. One man claimed the sound knew when he matched it. That evening he fell ill. His teeth loosened. By dawn he had vanished. Then there was the observatory chamber. It was sealed after the school's closure in 1982, but in 1979 a group of seniors broke in. Their written account, smuggled into a diary now held in private collection, describes the descent beneath the pulpit. A narrow stone staircase slick with moisture. Steps spiraling downward exactly 13 turns. At the bottom, a chamber too symmetrical to be accidental. Circular, 33 feet across. The walls lined with slate panels etched in patterns of intersecting arcs. At the center, 5 chairs. The chairs weren't ordinary. They were built of wood but reinforced with copper joints. Straps dangled from their arms. Beneath each chair, a hollow cut into the floor, big enough for a child to fit inside. The diary describes a smell, metallic, cloying, sweet, and a sound. A metronome. No clock in sight, but the tick was there, steady, unwavering, like a heartbeat. Then the ceiling. At its highest point, directly above the chairs, a dome had been fitted with a single aperture, small, precise, like the iris of an eye. When lit from above, the aperture cast a spiral of light that fell exactly onto the 5 chairs. This wasn't architecture. It was ritual engineering. We know from Ellis Thorne's journal, the last child who recorded his thoughts, that the ritual always began the same way. The children were placed in the 5 chairs, blindfolded, hands strapped. A tone was struck, low and hollow, resonating through the copper veins. The pulpit above amplified the leader's voice, splitting it into layers that echoed through the spiral chamber. The children were commanded to hum, not freely, not in their own pitch, but in tones drawn from glyphs carved into the slate. Each child a different frequency. Together, 5 notes. 5 notes that did not harmonize. 5 notes that grated against one another, grinding the chamber into a dissonance that rattled the bones. But when sustained long enough, the notes collapsed into something impossible. Silence that vibrated. Silence that moved. Ellis wrote of the first time he felt it. It wasn't sound anymore. It was breath. The walls pulled in and out like lungs, and I knew then it was listening. That was the purpose of the ritual, not to summon, not to praise, but to open the hollow, the breathing dars. Ark beneath Grayhaven. Some say the children were vessels, that the hollow entered them, lived inside them, wore them like skins. Others believe the children were offerings, their tones feeding the hollow like grain poured into a maw. Both may be true. The chamber itself was proof of intent. Every line, every arc, every copper vein pointed to design. The Brotherhood hadn't stumbled onto resonance. They had mapped it, engineered it, weaponized it. The chapel wasn't a place of prayer. It was a control room. And when the ritual reached its peak, the pulpit above split the leader's voice into layered echoes. To the children strapped below, it wasn't one voice speaking. It was dozens, hundreds, as if the stone itself were whispering commands. Describe the figure. Do not ask if it is there. It is always there. Open your mouth. Hum the tone. Keep humming until the silence answers. And when the silence answered, Grayhaven fed. The chapel has been sealed for 4 decades, chains across the doors, concrete poured into the stairwell. But to this day, those who trespass on the ruins swear they still hear the hum. Low, constant, waiting. Some say if you hum back, the chapel hums louder. And if you hum long enough, the silence begins to breathe. By now you might be wondering, was Grayhaven just superstition, just ritual, just frightened children in an old school built on bad soil? The answer lies not in religion, but in physics. Everything in the universe vibrates. Matter itself is only vibration slowed into form. Sound, especially at low frequencies, is not merely heard, it is felt. It moves through the body. It resonates with bone, with blood, with the nervous system. And when sound resonates at the right frequency, the body is no longer a passenger. It becomes an instrument. Infrasound, the spectrum below 20 Hz, too low for the human ear, has been documented for decades as a tool of disorientation and control. In 1973, French scientist Vladimir Gavreau accidentally discovered that a mechanical fan in his laboratory was generating a low-frequency hum that made his entire team sick, nausea, dizziness, hallucinations. One assistant collapsed, convinced his heart was being pulled out of rhythm. In the 1980s, the US military conducted classified tests with non-lethal acoustic weapons. Files later declassified show diagrams eerily similar to Grayhaven's concentric chambers, sound projected in waves, tuned not to kill but to weaken, confuse, break down resistance. And that spiral under the chapel, it was a resonance chamber, a primitive but devastatingly effective infrasound generator. The 5 children strapped to those chairs were not just part of a ritual, they were living resonators, their lungs, their throats, their bones vibrating against one another, creating what physicists call interference patterns. When 5 dissonant tones overlap, they create beat frequencies, ghost sounds between the notes often below the range of hearing. And those ghost sounds, they live in the infrasound spectrum. Infrasound does not stay confined to a room. It seeps through walls, through soil, through the body itself. And when it meets the right frequency, it doesn't just rattle the ears, it rattles perception. Documented effects include shadow apparitions. The eye's retina vibrating at infrasound can generate the illusion of figures in the periphery. Fear responses. Infrasound has been shown to trigger the body's fight or flight response, releasing adrenaline without cause. Disembodied voices. The brain, straining to interpret low frequencies, misfires, producing the impression of whispers where there are none. Sound familiar? Every phenomenon reported at Grayhaven, figures in the halls, whispers under hymns, the sense of being watched, could be explained as infrasound engineered into the chapel. But here's the catch. Infrasound explains the fear. It explains the hallucinations, it explains the haunted reputation, but it does not explain the disappearances. And this is where science meets something darker. The Brotherhood of Sable Mercy did not merely stumble into infrasound. They designed for it. Those copper veins beneath the floor were not decorative, they were conductors. Wires channeling vibration, a circuit etched into stone, a machine designed not just to frighten children, but to open something. What they were opening is still debated. Paranormal researchers argue the hollow was a dimensional breach. Skeptics suggest the children were driven mad, their bodies disposed of in sealed chambers. But one fact remains. Grayhaven's ritual mechanics were centuries ahead of modern acoustic warfare. And someone knew it. In 1998, a Department of Defense white paper was circulated internally, later leaked online. Its subject, Acoustic Applications in Population Control. Buried in its footnotes is a single line referencing the Grayhaven model. No context, no elaboration, just 3 words, attached to a case study on resonance chambers and adolescent test subjects. Why would a closed, rotting school in the woods appear in a Pentagon study? Unless what happened there wasn't myth. Unless Grayhaven was not an isolated case, but a prototype. The chilling possibility is this. The Brotherhood's rituals were a mask. Behind the candles and the hymns, behind the symbols and the blindfolds, was a science of control. Children weren't just sacrifices, they were instruments. And if the Pentagon referenced Grayhaven in 1998, who's to say the experiment didn't continue elsewhere, under different names, in different facilities? Think of the patterns. 5 subjects, always 5. Resonance chambers disguised as classrooms, churches, hospitals, symbols not for worship, but for calibration. The hum that never stops. Grayhaven may have burned, but the design survived, and this is where folklore and fact collapse into the same terrifying truth. Grayhaven wasn't haunted. It was a laboratory disguised as a school, wrapped in ritual, hiding in plain sight. And if its blueprint still circulates in government files, then perhaps the Brotherhood of Sable Mercy was not just a secret society. Perhaps it was the first draft of something larger, something still humming beneath our cities. In all the records, in all the whispers, in all the files dragged from Grayhaven's archives, there are always 5 names. They appear again and again, often in incomplete lists, sometimes with letters transposed, as if those writing were hesitant to fix them in print. But the pattern is clear. 5 children who entered the chapel and never returned. The names most often cited are Ellis Thorne, 12, the boy who wrote in his journal. Margaret Hale, 14, quiet, often described as listening too closely. Caleb and Ruth Mercer, twins, 10, withdrawn, rarely seen apart. Daniel Pritchard, 15, rebellious, punished often, the one who laughed during sermons. Together they form a pattern, not chosen randomly, selected. 5 voices, 5 tones. The Brotherhood's documents describe them not as children, but as instruments, each marked by a symbol in the margins of the roster. Not grades, not attendance, but circles and crescents. Notations of pitch, resonance, frequency. Ellis's journal, recovered in the ruins decades later, gives the clearest window into their final nights. His last entries are short, fragmented, written in handwriting that deteriorates as if rushed or trembling. They made us sit again. Ruth cried, but the hum covered her. I tried to hum wrong, but my chest hurt when I did. It knows when I'm false. The man at the pulpit told us not to stop, said if we stopped we'd hear it closer. Margaret stopped. She heard it. She screamed until she didn't. It breathes, not like us. It breathes through us. I think when we open our mouths, it is opening its mouth too. That is Ellis's last line. The journal ends there. No further trace of him exists. What little we know of the others comes second-hand. A custodian later confessed, under the influence of morphine in a hospital bed, that he had seen the twins lowered into the hollow beneath the chairs. He said they were awake, eyes open but not moving. He said he heard a sound coming from their mouths, though their lips were still. Margaret was said to have been taken by the spiral, a phrase that appears in multiple accounts, though no one could define it. Some suggest she was pulled into the resonance itself, her body collapsing, her presence dissolving into vibration. As for Daniel Pritchard, the rebellious one. He left no body, no journal, no grave, only a rumor. Teachers spoke of seeing him, months later, at the edge of the woods, barefoot, pale, humming. When approached, he vanished. What unites all five is absence. No bodies recovered, no graves, no closure, just disappearances, sealed off by administrators who told parents their children had been relocated. But relocated where? Some researchers argue that the five were consumed by the hollow, that the resonance chamber was not merely a machine, but a mouth, that the children, bound and humming, were its food. Others believe they became vessels, that when the silence breathed through them, as Ellis wrote, something entered, something that walked them out of the school under cover of night, wearing their shapes but not their souls. And then there is two, the most unsettling possibility of all, that they are still there, not dead, not alive, suspended, resonating in the hollow chamber beneath the chapel, 5 tones stretched across eternity, waiting for someone to unlock the doors again. The reason this theory persists is because of the hum. Visitors to the ruins report it constantly, not loud but steady, always the same frequency, always seeming to come from beneath the earth. And those who linger too long claim that if you concentrate you can pick out not one hum but 5. 5 tones. Ellis, Margaret, Caleb, Ruth, Daniel, still humming, still waiting. The Brotherhood of Sable Mercy wrote of this as the chorus of the hollow, not gone, not alive, not dead, a state in between sustained by the resonance. And maybe that is the real horror of Grayhaven. Not that children died there, but that they didn't. That they are still instruments, still singing a silence that listens back. Which leads us to the final, unanswered question, the one the Pentagon file hints at, the one the ruins still hum with today. If the children are still humming in the hollow, who or what are they humming for? Grayhaven was officially abandoned in 1957 after a fire gutted the upper floors. The ruins were fenced off, condemned, left to rot. Administrators claimed the fire was accidental, faulty wiring in the chapel, but investigators noted something stranger. The fire had burned downward, as if the blaze had started in the foundation and eaten its way toward the sky. After the closure, the school faded from records, but it did not fade from memory. Local children dared each other to climb the fence, to run through the halls, to sit in the charred pews of the chapel and wait for the hum. And always they heard it. Always the same story. A vibration in the chest, a whisper at the edge of hearing, a pressure behind the eyes. By the 1970s, Grayhaven had become a magnet for trespassers, teenagers, urban explorers, amateur occultists. Few stayed long. Those who did often emerged shaken, refusing to speak of what they saw, but fragments of testimony survive. One group of college students in 1974 brought a reel-to-reel recorder into the chapel. The tape, later circulated in paranormal circles, plays back only static until the 6-minute mark. Then a low, steady hum begins. At first faint, then louder, then 5 distinct tones. The students are heard panicking, shouting, rushing for the exit. The tape ends abruptly with a sound like a door slamming from inside the recorder itself. The machine was found cracked open, its reels twisted, as if crushed by immense pressure. In 1986, a paranormal investigator named Roger Mallory published a short article in a fringe magazine, claiming he had decoded the hum of Grayhaven. According to Mallory, the 5 tones correspond to precise heart's frequencies, matching the natural resonances of human skulls at different sizes. Mallory concluded the children's hum had been engineered to shake open the seat of the soul. 2 months later, Mallory vanished. His apartment was found intact, but his reel-to-reel recorder, loaded with tape, was missing. His notes ended with a single unfinished sentence. When the 5th tone returns, the hollow will... It stops there. By the 1990s, Grayhaven's legend had spread online. Early message boards carried threads of self-proclaimed witnesses. Some claimed the chapel was warm even in winter, the walls vibrating with a heat-like breath. Others described seeing figures at the edge of their vision, 5 figures, always children, humming. In 2003, a group of ghost hunters live-streamed from the ruins. The broadcast cut out after 43 minutes. The last frame showed the group in the chapel standing in a circle, mouths open, humming. Their eyes were unfocused, their heads tilted back. None of them remembered doing this when they reviewed the footage later. Which raises the question, is the hum still active? Or is it inside those who enter, pulling them into the pattern, making them instruments of the hollow? And perhaps more chilling, was the ritual ever completed? Remember, the Brotherhood of Sable Mercy believed the silence beneath the world was not only listening, but waiting. Their chorus of the hollow was meant to feed it, to open a passage, but the fire interrupted everything. The school closed, the ritual stopped mid-song. What if it never ended? What if the children, suspended in resonance, are still humming beneath the chapel, still carboing the tones, still waiting for someone to finish the song? And what if every trespasser who enters Grayhaven adds another layer to the chorus? Every footstep, every whispered dare, every nervous hum to mask their fear, feeding the silence more voices. This theory has haunted investigators for decades, that Grayhaven is not a closed story, that it is ongoing, that the hollow is still hungry. The Pentagon reference to the Grayhaven model in 1998 suggests someone, somewhere, still studies the blueprint, still applies it, still believes the resonance chamber wasn't a failure, but a prototype. And if that's true, then the question becomes, where else is the Grayhaven model operating? In hospitals, in new schools, in facilities buried beneath cities, tuned not for ritual but for control. Maybe Grayhaven was only the beginning. Even now, locals say that if you stand near the ruins on a still night, the wind will carry the hum. Some claim you can pick out the 5 tones if you know how to listen. Others insist it's only imagination. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. If you linger too long, you'll feel the silence listening back. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself humming along. The story of Grayhaven is not a story of the past. It is a story of resonance, a story of echoes. And echoes, by their very nature, never truly die. Think of it, 5 children chosen not for who they were, but for the tones their bodies could carry. 5 voices arranged like notes in a song, forced to hum in unison, not for prayer, not for punishment, but for something far older and deeper, something waiting beneath the silence. The Brotherhood of Sable Mercy told themselves it was sacred, that the hum would lift their voices into eternity, that they were opening a door into the hollow. But if Ellis Thorne's journal is true, then it was never about opening a door. It was about becoming the door. It breathes through us, he wrote. When we open our mouths, it opens its mouth too. And then the hum continued, and the children were gone. The ruins today are quiet, but not empty. They still vibrate with that frequency. They still hum, faint but undeniable, 5 tones stretched thin across decades. Visitors describe the same sensations over and over, a pressure in the skull, a heat in the chest, a pull like being drawn forward by an invisible thread. The government called it the Grayhaven model. Scientists mapped it as resonance induction. The Brotherhood believed it was the chorus of the hollow. But no matter the language, the meaning is the same, a silence that listens back. And maybe that is the most disturbing truth. Because silence, by definition, should be empty. It should be nothing. But at Grayhaven, the silence is not nothing. It is hungry. Which leaves us with one final question, the one that echoes through every page, every testimony, every hum that still rattles the chapel floorboards. The children are still humming, the hollow is still listening, so who exactly are they humming for? And more importantly, when the song finally ends, what happens if something hums back?